Now is Andy Goss, the Group Sales Operations Director at Jaguar Land Rover, live from Frankfurt. Andy, thanks very much for joining us here on CNBC TV 18. So that, you may have heard what Ralph Swait was talking about, again, laying out, your ambition to go electric from 2020. But let's take a few more specific questions. I mean, let's talk about China, because that is one of your largest market. And very recently, the Chinese government has said that they are looking at a future beyond petrol and diesel, banning petrol and diesel cars going forward. While this announcement, of course, comes when you've talked about going electric, but importantly, are you concerned? Because earlier this year, you've started your first engine manufacturing plant in China to make diesel engines, your first such plant outside the United Kingdom. So how do you look upon the commentary?
Well, I think there are many announcements in the world today, and many politicians make announcements on what they would like to see in the future. And, we have announcements about 2040, we have announcements about 2030. We even have European markets like Norway who are zero emission from 2025. So I think what we need from the Chinese government is further clarification. I strongly suspect that the Chinese market will be the biggest electric market in the world. To a certain degree it is now, but I can see that situation accelerating. It wouldn't change the decisions that we've made, quite frankly, because we're dealing with the here and now. We've got a number of battery electric vehicles that we intend to bring out in the future for China as import vehicles, and maybe there's a stage where we build vehicles like that in China as well. So the world's, lots of things are changing in this marketplace at the moment. There's not just China. Most governments are making some sort of announcement or another. We'll deal with these issues as there's more clarity on the regulation, but it's not unexpected to a large degree.
All right, Andy, let's talk about your big electric push, because some people have voiced their concerns with your decision to go electric for 2020, because they say, after all, Jaguar Land Rover's core strength eventually lies in diesel technology, and that electric mobility is a completely new territory for you, where you will now be opened up to competition from companies like Nissan and Volvo. So how do you see the competitive landscape panning out for Jaguar Land Rover from 2020?
I think the first point I have to make is that electrification is just one option, and it sits alongside clean diesels and clean petrols from a consumer perspective. Electric cars aren't the right solution for everybody, and one big task moving forward, I would strongly suggest, is matching the customer need with the right powertrain. Maybe in urban environments that might be an electric solution or a PHEV solution, but for certain customers who have got a different driving pattern of that is not the way forward for them. And I think in the foreseeable future, clearly, clean petrols and clean diesels will still be the vast majority of the market in overall global terms. Now, coming back to your question, everybody has entered this market relatively fresh. I would say to a certain degree, Tesla probably paved the way for most people, but there's now an armada of products coming over the horizon that will come into the marketplace, and we're no different in that respect. So we know how to do this. We think it's very important. We react to the market need, and I say again, it's not just a question of compliance now. There's a genuine consumer need for these cars, and we're going to react positively to that consumer need. We've got engineers in the UK working very hard on these technologies. The first car to be brought to the market in the premium segment will be a Jaguar. It'll be the I-Pace concept. So we're confident that we've got the right solutions as well.
All right, Andy, let's talk about India, because there's a lot of talk now back home here in India about electric vehicles, with the government really trying their best to push industry towards electric powertrains. Does India at all feature on Jaguar Land Rover's overall electric or hybrid ambitions going forward?
Well, it certainly could do, because we're engineering global cars. So in terms of the plug-in hybrids, as an example, in terms of the I-Pace concept, we're making these cars for global markets. And if the fiscal policies are right, and if the infrastructure is right, if the charging infrastructure is right, there's no reason why not. Clearly, we've localized a hell of a lot of vehicles in India in the first place. I would still say that the majority of the marketplace there for the foreseeable future will be clean petrol, clean diesel. But if we need to react in a very different way, then we'll be up for that we'll be able to react in that particular fashion. So, we're not daunted by it. It's a challenge for everybody, it's a challenge for the whole of the industry. But this is the era we live in now. Effectively, there's a bit of a new industrial revolution taking place in terms of cars and powertrains. That's the fact of the matter.
All right, let's pick one point. You've talked about fiscal policy in India, so let's stick with that. Your India team may have told you that recently hybrid cars are now being taxed at over 28%, whereas electric cars are being taxed at 12%. So because of the discrepancy, could that at all hamper your hybrid plans for India, if you have any, that is?
Well, let me give you a different example, which I think has got a certain correlation. There's one market in Europe, Norway, which is now 36% electric and PHEV. Now, why? It's not because consumers were automatically clamouring for electric vehicles and PHEVs. It was a sort of a dovetail, if you like, between the car manufacturers and then the government putting the infrastructure in place in terms of fiscal policies, in terms of certain toll charging, in terms of parking arrangements, in terms of public charging. Now, if all that comes together, that's when the thing really takes off for a consumer. Now, if that can be achieved in Norway, it could potentially be achieved elsewhere. I don't know if it can be achieved in India, but if that is the case, we can react positively because we're making global cars. We expect this to be an increasing part of the portfolio moving forward. It's just a question of which market and when and to what extent. So, we've already got templates out there to learn from, I would suggest.
All right, Andy, so basically you're saying that India should look at the Norwegian model more closely, but what assurances do you want from the government of India if you were to bring in your electric vehicles or hybrid vehicles?
What we need is certainty everywhere in the world, actually, because, we're making huge investment decisions that have got a long lead time to them, certainly a long lead time in terms of delivery. And above all, we need to know what the compliance regimes are, what the fiscal regimes are, and then we need some certainty to bring cars to market. What we can't deal with is a huge patchwork of different scenarios, because not just ourselves, but no car manufacturers can deal with that situation. So above all, we need clarity, we need assurance. If we get that, then we can actually react in a very positive manner with a certain degree of optimism. That's our basic requirement.
All right, Andy, many thanks for joining us here on CNBC TV 18. That was Andy Goss of Jaguar Land Rover joining us from the Frankfurt Motor Show. Moving on to